Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. Andrew Pitagorsky, the VP of Brand Partnerships over at Slam. Been back at Slam now for about a year and a half. This is actually my second tour of duty with the company. I worked in a similar role back in 2003 to 2008. Left for a while and came back last summer, really in a similar position.
Cool. So you said 2003 to 2008, and now very different times, I would say, in terms of media and so on.
Very different. Back then, the internet was starting. There was no social media. There was no, we were just starting to embrace video content. We really saw an importance of, we just saw how important video was going to be to that media ecosystem back then. And when I left the company, it was just a way different company. There was probably 8 or 9 of us back then. Now there's probably close to 30 or 35 employees at Slam. So the company has really evolved as it should and as it needed to stay relevant within, a current media environment, right? Where now the focus is so strong on social media, video, live events. Obviously today it's a little challenging to do events, but in the next few weeks we'll probably release a couple of things that will surprise a bunch of people. So it's, I left really back then for no one reason. I mean, I was young and impressionable and when other companies come to you, I guess it's a flattering thing to be, have people put a carrot in front of your head and be like, hey, why don't you come over here? And sometimes, when you're young, you definitely think the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, which is not always the case.
I mean, it is not. It is not. But I'll start with kind of a reflection in terms of how we experience Slam, because I think that that we want to deep dive into that. I mean, when we are basketball nerds. We tried to play the game. We had our hopes to be pro and so on back in the island. I suppose be back in the Balkans as well. But the way we saw Slam was like that place in which aspirations kind of came to fruition, right? I mean, you saw the different the different covers and basically all the stories and so on. And actually, that gave us a look into the scene and the basketball culture, especially, and this is more pertinent actually for in the case of Luis and myself, because we're Dominicans, and as you know, New York has that mecca meaning to our community. I mean, actually, the biggest Dominican community outside of the Dominican Republic resides in New York, right? And I want you to kind of dwell a little bit in terms of how, let's say, how artisanal or how much of art was back then when you were actually getting those stories and getting those cover stories and actually getting the magazine into the stands and into the hands of the fans.
I mean, I think my internet was chopping up a little bit, so I think I got most of that. But, back then, we considered ourselves the basketball internet, right? We were like the internet before the internet. You couldn't find any information about real cultural basketball things unless you read Slam, right? There was no, ESPN wasn't covering it. There was no Bleacher Report. There was no real outlet for the culture of basketball. And so when Slam launched in '94, before my time there, I was still in high school. It was really the first media entity of any sort to really cover the culture, right? And we were like this intersection of basketball and lifestyle, and we embraced it. And 26 years later, we still embrace it, and we still speak for the players, for the lifestyle around the game, whether it's on the court, off the court. Game is, we're there, right? So whether it's high school, street ball, international, NBA, WNBA, we're at every intersection of the game. So we celebrate it in a different way that a more corporate entity probably cannot, right? Even Bleacher tries to be somewhat of what we are, but they're not. They're obviously owned by Turner, and there are just certain things that they can't do that we can, right? So I think that, I don't know if that answers the question, but
no, definitely. I do believe that when you talk about media, kind of the masthead or the brand and so on carries weight, especially because the media business is predicated on access towards the subjects or the league or whatever. And I think that the industry, sports entertainment industry, and especially basketball, the basketball industry within that, it's so diverse and it has so much content and stories to tell that kind of there are slices of the pie for everyone, but the perspective is different. Actually, when we were doing the prep conversation, I was giving the guys my view on how I see the industry today, and we'll go through that process with you as well. But the way I perceive what Bleacher does, or Uninterrupted, or Players Tribune, or Overtime, so it's completely different, one to another, and to Slam, precisely because you probably were the first movers into actually being at the pulse of the culture. The others, they have access through let's say outside in towards the culture. So either it's editorial because you are part of a big media group, so it's more journalistic approach, or you are a partner of the league and it's more of a on audiovisual content and so on and so on, or you are a player like Uninterrupted and what those guys have done, which is outstanding. So yeah, I do agree that it is sensibly different. That that leads me to a jump, which I hope Luis can rein us in back and allow us to go in order. Yeah. But the jump is right now, because back in the day, you have to have that physical experience, going to the newsstand or waiting for the subscription to hit your house, right?
Yep.
And what's more decisive in terms of you wanted that.
Yep.
Now we're just so much into content, right?
There's just so much content out there. And, back in the day, like, it was a thing. You saved your money to go buy Slam at the magazine, at the newsstand, right? I remember back years ago, there was always competitors that were like free magazines versus, ours that you had to go out and buy. And, they would have these massive circulations because they were giving them out for free so they could charge advertisers more. And our thing was like, hey, people pay money for a Slam, right? Like, the kid saves his money so he can go get the magazine from the newsstand. It's a whole different experience, and the one of the craziest things, that I see to this day, that, obviously there's not many magazines still out there, right? The whole industry has shifted to social, to digital, to video. But at the end of the day, the players all still want to be on a cover, right? So they grow up aspiring to be on the cover of Slam. And when we present them their first cover, it's a celebration. It's really a coming out party of sorts where, guys, they'll blow it up, they'll hang it on their wall in their house. And it's bigger than just being in a piece of content, right? It's your in the basketball world and in the universe that we live in, it's really it's the thing, right? It's what the guys all want to, at the end of the day, they all want that first cover and even the second cover and the third cover. But the first cover really means something special to them. And, it blows me away to really, witness it still today, so many years later, how important that piece still is, where, a lot of brands and, just people in the industry don't really understand it in a way because media is consumed so differently. But that cover still means so much to the players that it gives us really a competitive advantage to get access with the guys, right? So when we're working with athletes and players, they all want to be in Slam. So it's different than a brand going at them directly, where it's just a different story to tell, right? They all want, so whether it's, that access point gives us the cover, but then it also gives us access to do other types of content, whether it's video, social, and it keeps guys engaged with us, right? They want to be in Slam. That's what they grow up, as a little kid, and still to now, like they wait till, it comes in the mail, it's like a whole thing. And there are so many brands that have been inspired by Slam back in the day that now people have done their own thing. And, like we've done collabs with a bunch of different brands, from a merchandise perspective, that were really inspired by the magazine and them growing up going to the newsstand to get the magazine. So, now
it's a different conversation. Yeah.
Now obviously we have our own merchandise and we're really, we're not just a media company, we're a brand, right? So, we're the only, if you want to say media company in 2K, right? So, if you in the new 2K, you can get, Slam merch, you got your avatar rocking Slam hoodies and t-shirts, and we're the only, per se media company that is in the game, coupled with all these lifestyle brands that, you're paying your hard-earned money, whether it's virtual currency, but at the end of the day, there's a real money component behind that, to get our merch. And that just helps our brand and our brand awareness. And, there's so many things that, back years ago, you never would have thought were imaginable, going to like, us sponsoring a team in Australia. Right. And
that's a crazy story. I want to hear all about that.
And,
Definitely.
Everywhere you saw LaMelo highlight, you see the Slam brand. So, we knew he was going to, we knew who he is. We knew who he was. We knew he's, going to be a top pick. And it's great every time now leading up to the draft. Anytime you see a highlight, you're going to see that Slam logo across his chest, which is
it could be the best ambush in basketball in recent times. I mean, evidently, he made the highlights, Sports Center, Complex, Bleacher Report, all of the guys, and they had to carry the Slam brand. Yeah.
Nope. Right. You can't blur out that logo across his chest. So, and even though we had the Slam logo on the court, so it was a great partnership that really, helped from a global brand recognition. Not that I wouldn't say we were hurting on on brand recognition globally, but it just really brought it to the modern era. Yeah. That the game is so international, the brand is so international. I always felt as a kid, and even to this day, that being around basketball is just the greatest equalizer across all cultures. Right? Once you stepped on the court, everybody's the same, so it's one of the few sports I think that really brings everybody together. And obviously we've seen that, in the past few months with, the way things have been from a, society aspect, that the basketball players are always kind of the leaders that bring everybody together.
Absolutely.
And
now let me recoup something that you mentioned about 2K, because the other day I was listening to to a podcast, the Paul Rivera podcast with Paul Rivera, and he had Alfie Brody from 2K as a guest. And actually, when you were describing the process or the feelings that, you know, the feedback that you get from players of being in the cover, probably that's the only thing that equates in terms of desires or aspirations of players, which is, you know, being on the cover of Slam magazine and being on the cover of 2K. And actually, it's really interesting to see those two merging into the game, and actually it's outstanding, because actually that's the combination of you know, many things that are very personal to the players, especially the ones that have, you know, grown up with Slam or the game, which was actually you know, those covers come because you are killing it on the league, or because you are having momentous occasions in your career. So those are the mementos that you have to actually go back in time and see, you know, that's when I, you know, made Rookie of the Year, or my first All-Star, or, you know, whatever it might be. So it's yeah, you're part, an intrinsic part of the culture because of that.
Great. I wanted to highlight, actually, you kind of answered the question before I asked it, in terms of how you make yourself more outstanding within this you know, so many mediums that you have, players coming up with their own let's say platforms, or building their own platforms, and by the answering with this example of having sponsoring a team that had LaMelo and so on, it's one of those things. What other approaches as a brand, you're into fashion and all this stuff, what other approaches are you guys eyeing into this current time and in the immediate future, let's say?
You know, I would say the current time is obviously probably one of the most difficult time periods that we've all experienced. You know, I think in the past 100 years, you know, the situation that we're all living in and you know, dealing with on a day-to-day basis is just nothing we've ever experienced. But the ability to adapt and keep it going and just keep it moving, right? And, you know, still being everywhere where the game is, but at a more cautious level, right? You know, there's a lot of things in place that we need to be considerate of people, you know, what they're comfortable with, but at the same time being a part of what's going on, right? And, you know, ingraining ourselves, you know, we're so deeply a part of the culture and a part of, you know, the world basketball lens, really, that it's just doing it the right way and making sure, you know, we have safety and protocols in place, but still being progressive and, you know, the leader and doing things differently every day, right? And just trying to figure out new ways to, you know, work with partners. And you know, my role specifically is, you know, VP of brand partnerships. What does that really mean, right? You know, I'm working with brands like Nike, Under Armour, Foot Locker, Gatorade, the Army, Adidas, Converse, you know, a lot of the players in the basketball space to figure out ways now specifically, right, that we can still do things. Is that just, you know, posting their brand message? Is that, you know, working with their players to, you know, bring the brand, you know, whatever story they want to tell, bring that to life across our channels, right? And we have multiple channels, right? We've got Slam Main, Slam Kick, Slam High School, W Slam, League Fits is us. You know, what are the ways to bring that brand message to life in a world where people are, you know, a lot of people are sitting on their couch working from home, right? So, you know, there's a lot of Zoom calls. There's a lot of, you know, I always think now really like you got like 5 Zoom calls to do something that you could have banged out in a half hour in the office, throwing some stuff on the whiteboard. Just because, you know, the reality of it is, how long can someone sit in front of their screen without getting distracted and like thinking about something else? An email pops up, you know, you got to look at this, you got to take care of that. You know, it's hard to stay focused, right? It's really hard to keep everybody, you might need 10 people in a room to, get the ideas together, and to have everybody on the same page for, an hour or a half hour looking at a computer screen is challenging, right? But, I think the team that we have, because it's a smaller team, and I've always felt that, big corporate companies are great and, they do their thing, but the smaller teams are a little more nimble and can really get shit done, right? Like, there's not as many layers of politics and just approval processes. Like, if it's a smaller, tighter team, it's a little easier to make really cool shit happen. And that's what we like to do. We like to really do cool stuff that resonates with the world and the basketball audience and the lifestyle of the game. And, when I've been a part of big companies, I've been a part of small companies. I think, and especially in a time like now, the smaller companies have a little competitive edge just because of that process, right? But, we're every day's, we're just trying to figure out ways to do cool things, whether that's the merch, where you see, like, you're wearing the hoodie right there. I got the T-shirt on. We're constantly coming up with new ways to reach that audience. What's the new thing, right? You want to kind of get in front of that a little bit. Obviously, from a merchandise world, it takes time to produce all that stuff, and that's a whole nother conversation. I would say that I don't really get involved with.
Overseas shipping takes its time. I'm gonna say that,
especially now, right? I mean, bringing in product from overseas is definitely challenging, with the way the world is right now, right? So, are there ways to do things locally? But, we're constantly pumping out content, whether it's to embrace, the things going on in America or internationally, or, just the world in itself, right? Like, how are we going about that? What's the lens that we want to put out there? And most of the time, I would say really all the time, we're with the players, right? We are the players' voice, a little differently than some other outlets, but we really are true to what the players want and experience and feel. And, we put out, a few, things the past few months about, social equality. And, we put out a special issue where we had Melo as the, guest editor in chief. And, that really hit home, I think, across the board, really about, the message we want to stand for and what we get behind.
Definitely. Now, go ahead, B. Go ahead.
I was just going to jump in because I wanted to make a comment about something followed with a question. So, Rayde mentioned I grew up in Yugoslavia, but around 2000 I moved to New York. So I feel like I'm a proud New Yorker from that aspect. And the thing that I remember is that when I first moved there, I used the Slam magazine as a cultural guide. So I played ball before moving to New York, and for me it was like a cultural guide. Whether it was like the AI cover with the core, with the big afro and these things, it gave me a new layer of what is a ball from like a US point of view. And now that I kind of think about it, what we're talking about here, and this new age of digitization and all these things, and we also have this really cool trend of European players getting bigger and having bigger impact. Is it Luka? Is it Giannis? These guys. So my question would be like, what is Slam doing from that aspect of catering maybe a little bit more to international audience? I know like guys like Rayde, they get their subscriptions, they come in, but with Luka and these guys, what do you see as the new kind of wave of content that kind of grabs the international audience too?
I mean, Luka is unbelievable, right? And Giannis as well. I mean, the two of them have really put, I think, the EuroLeague on the map in a different way than we've ever imagined. Luka, I mean, the things he's doing at his age and what he's accomplished in the last few years is just unbelievable. Right now it's a little challenging, I would say, just because of the restrictions on things, because of COVID, because of capturing content because of the way the borders are kind of, sealed, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in the future we're going to embrace it more, and I think you'll see more things coming out from our end that really embrace the whole globalization of the game, which is the last 3 to 5 years I would say has really exploded. There was always the globalization of the game, but with young guys like that really taking it to the next level, I think it's important for us to really do more from that aspect. So I can't speak right now to specific things that we may be working on, just because it's so challenging at this point to really, put a camera crew in another country, right? Let alone in New York or in, Miami or in California. There's just a lot of challenges right now, but I think once, hopefully things go back to normal, I think we'll be doing more, all over the place. And that really started with, as you guys saw, what we did in Australia, right? We knew how important that was. LaMelo is like the next guy, right? He's just next, right? So we saw how important that was going to be, and like really that whole new wave of opportunity for guys, right? Where they can go from high school to international. And obviously, the league has kind of stepped in and, with the G League and the special team they've got there. So we'll see how that shakes out. But I think, the international world of basketball has never been more important than it is today.
Yeah. And I wanted to say that it makes it even more attractive, and I believe we actually covered that in one of our previous episodes, right? That when we were talking about like these guys coming up, the Lucas and Giannis and all these guys, they are very much in tune with the culture that Slam represents, because they've grew up looking at the game at this stage and having the same aspirations as the American kids and so on. And you will have more of those guys in Europe.
Absolutely. Actually, and it's to Pete's point in terms of the democratization of the game, or actually the culture through basketball. Actually, it might take longer for the magazine to reach, but when it hits very, very strongly. I mean, when you go to Madrid, Berlin, Barcelona, Munich, or Athens, Istanbul. I mean, basketball is actually consumed in the same way, probably a different language, but it's the same. It's about the latest kicks. It's about that experiences, and the stars, either European or American, are the same. So every kid that aspires to be, the next LeBron, the next Kobe, rest in peace, or the next Luka. I mean, Luka is as popular and as a star here in Spain than back in his native Slovenia than what he is right now in the US. That's global stardom. I mean, and that's I see that, in the basketball space. Actually, yeah.
Something to say about that. It's like I was saying earlier. I always felt basketball was the greatest equalizer of all people, right? If you played ball, you had the same interest of a kid playing ball, whether it was in Spain, whether it was in Latin America, whether it was in South America, whether it was in, Asia. That kid that plays ball, and then if you just grow up with that, everybody's on the same level, right? Once everybody steps on the court, you're a ball player. That's it. But when you build relationships on the court like that, it travels off the court as well, and it really helps society. And it's no wonder that the NBA is the leader of, society, really, from when things are going rough. The NBA kind of becomes the leader of the pack and tries to, put the best foot forward for everybody. And I think when the NBA starts something, everybody else follows.
Yeah,
and
absolutely,
that's
absolutely.
because of that.
Actually, yeah, we need to give them props, because actually, they act as that beacon within the sports entertainment industry, and I think that is because of the popularity they have. Regardless whatever someone might say about the ratings of the finals, I mean, they just crushed it in digital, which is where their audience is right now, and that's something that we need to be cognizant of.
It's like you read my mind, man. I was going to talk about
you saw that when they started looking down because of COVID there, then not only the US followed, in Europe, in other countries, and actually, they follow suit. So that's influence and at its best.
So
go ahead, Luis.
No, I was just going to say that you read my mind. That I wanted to bring up the whole, because we were debating that in one of our chat groups as well, how, and you can see it in mainstream media covering this with the whole election stuff. There's some people saying, oh, the NBA's ratings are going down because of all these political statements and whatnot. But when you actually look at the whole thing, it's not true. It's actually even expanding.
And that's very telling, because for me, at least, I don't know how you feel about this, Pete, but for me, this is not a political statement or stance that the NBA is doing. It's a human.
Exactly. No, it's a human thing, a person. Like, it's about people. And
correct.
All people are equal, and that's just the way it is, and it should be. Like, and the NBA as a leader in the space, they come out and say it straight up, right? That's it. All people are equal, and that's it. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter where you grew up. It doesn't matter what your beliefs are. People are equal across the board. And
that's what it is. That's what it is.
Full stop. That's it. Yeah.
So Slam has, many great issues, many great stories. If I can ask you, like, just to make a little bit of transition, your favorite issue, your favorite story featuring Slam.
Wow, that's there's a lot of them. There's
top three then.
Top three, yeah.
Top three. Oh man. I mean, it's, I would say probably, the ones early on when I was, a young buck per se, and coming on board, and just, you always forget, you never forget, like, the first ad you sold. And, the first ad I ever sold in my life was to Master P for P. Miller Footwear. And, it's an interesting story because now, 17 years later, me and P are friends, right? So, like, we have our own interesting relationship, and it's a real friendship, and it was the first ad I ever sold. I sold it to him directly, and it was in a Kobe issue. I think it was when he was holding a snake maybe on the cover. Yeah, I mean, that will always stand out in my head as, some of these just relationships that you create over the years. And the business really is about creating great relationships. And, a lot of the relationships I built back in 2003 to 2008 are still the relationships that, help me to this day. So, I feel fortunate to really be put in a place where, I was given a great path forward by the people that have, mentored me and led me. And, but I would say that one probably sticks out the most. I remember another, one issue we did, one of the street ball issues, and I was down there hanging out with Nate Robinson, and it was cool. It was, we had a good time shooting that. And I remember it was down, like, on downtown somewhere in New York City under, like, a bridge. And there was just, like, this random basketball court that he was, throwing it down for the cover. But we had a lot of good times, over the years. And, now, things are awesome also. Like, the events we do now are obviously we're hoping to get back to events, but like last year, the Slam Summer Classic, I mean, you couldn't have scripted a movie to be as awesome as that was, right? There were certain parts of that you looked around, and there were, standing room only, and literally standing room from the buildings around the park on top of the roof, right? Which I was just like, wow, like we really hit this. And, environments like that, I got to the court probably, I don't think the gates opened until maybe noon. And I probably got there around 8 or 9 just to, help with the setup and everything. And the line was already down the block, blocks long. And, it's free to get in, and kids were just lining up. Like, it was hot. It was one of the hottest days of the summer, and nobody cared. They just wanted to get in and watch some awesome hoops. So the Slam Summer Classic is definitely one of the most memorable, I would say, events of all time. And hopefully, we get back to some normalcy and we can bring that back.
Definitely. I mean, actually, that's a beauty and goes to what we were talking at the beginning in terms of New York as a reference. When you look back, I mean, evidently this is pre our time. What the old Knicks, 70 Knicks, meant to the city and to the game. Luis and I, we have one of our uncles, brother of my father, may rest in peace. I mean, he grew up in basketball terms in New York. I mean, he was raised there. He went to play for I think it was Fordham and Manhattan College, right?
Yeah.
Then he went on to play national team in the Dominican, head coach. I mean, he's the winningest person ever to win as many titles as a player, as a coach, and as a manager, a general manager. And that's kind of the reference that we have. I mean, when we met him and he was, telling old stories or, bringing players back from the city and so on. And New York has that vibe. I mean, everyone that knows basketball knows the names, at least of the 2-3 parks that you need to if you want to call yourself a baller, you need to play at least once there and actually try to do it well. If not, you will get kicked out of the court, right? And you need to do an indictment, rocker. I mean, and you see, actually, it's funny because a lot of especially Dominican players, there are a few here in Europe. But the common thread that those have, so Edgar Sosa, James Fielding, the Greer brothers a few years ago, and so on, was that they were actually part of that street scene, and they went on to play college, and they would play pro, and so on, and they made a good living here in Europe. And you had that, and that's a different type of player. I mean, when you see a New York bred player, even playing at the pro level, you notice that, like Omar Cook, for example, he's still at it here in Madrid in Estudiantes. He's killing the league.
You can't recreate that environment at those parks anywhere, and that's one of the reasons we do the classic there, at Dyckman, right? Because all of these kids, they mostly play indoors, in gyms, in controlled environments, and the experience you get playing at Dyckman is like no other, right? So you can't recreate that at a different park. You can't recreate that in a gymnasium. It's just a special basketball atmosphere that, especially if you're a top talent and you can show up there, the crowd will love you forever. You're good, and they'll let you know. And if you're not good, they'll let you know too. It's it's a place to really showcase the top talent because they just appreciate it so much, so much, right? Like it's, they show the love and there's just no place like it. Like, there were certain parts of last year's game that you literally, you couldn't have scripted a television commercial to be that for the brands that were being associated with the game, right? So, there was a part at the end of the game where literally probably like 100 kids were chasing the double-decker bus that we had down the street with the kids on it, blasting music, throwing autographs and just running through the streets with this bus full of basketball players. It was amazing, and the back had a brand logo on it, and it was awesome.
It's awesome, and it's different, and everyone wants to aspire to do that. Actually, Bobito tends to do his European runs, and actually he organizes some sort of street runs and so on, kind of in major cities. Last summer was Barcelona, Milan, Berlin, in different places, and you see there's a vibe there. And actually, that's the atmosphere that everyone wants to recreate. Yeah. Evidently, that it's not the same. I mean, this is Europe. Weather is different, people is different. Yep. But you have that admiration for New York City basketball, which is which is outstanding, of the charts.
Absolutely.
So New York, two big franchises. Naturally, the Knicks, which I don't remember the last time they won anything or participated.
But it's still only the Knicks. You know what I mean? Like I'm a diehard Knicks fan.
Right. No, I wanted you to settle out debate for me, because now you have the Brooklyn Nets, and the Nets have Kevin Durant coming up. It doesn't matter.
I don't think it matters. I think it's at least from my personal perspective, it doesn't matter how good the Nets are. It's all about the Knicks in New York, right? And right now is a hard time, and it's been a hard time, for the last
20 years, something like that.
20. Too many years. I grew, when I grew up in the heyday of Ewing and Starks and Oakley and those guys, that was the team, and that really
was the final, man. That was it.
That was the squad, right? And New York was buzzing, basketball was hot. You could go anywhere. Everybody wanted to talk about the Knicks. Defense was the way to win, right? You won by playing hard defense, and that was it, right? You would lock people down, and that was just the buzz, right? That anywhere you went, that was it. It's hard now, right? We're so irrelevant and so
laughing stock is what comes to mind.
Laughing stock, and that's an easy way out, right? It's challenging, and the younger generation doesn't really understand the history of the Knicks, what it means to people a little older and my age and above, because all they know is them just being terrible, right? Yeah. But I would say the Nets still don't matter. It doesn't matter who they have, right? At least in a lot of people's heads, they're still the New Jersey Nets, right? It doesn't matter that they play in Brooklyn. They're to a lot of people.
No, I think they need a little bit more time, and probably for the looks of it, winning something to cement their positioning here. But yeah, definitely. I mean, New York is Knicks town.
It's a one-team town. But this year might be different. If when Durant plays and Kyrie's on the court, and they have Nash as the coach now, and
they'll have buzz. They'll have buzz for sure.
They've got a great nucleus of young guys with some veterans now. So they've got talent there. There's a lot of talent. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see if fans can be in an arena and when that kind of stuff happens, and how that plays out to just the whole vibe of it, right? But I feel even when the Knicks are terrible, you can go to Barclays and there'll be more Knicks fans than Nets fans.
Sure. And from the aspirational point of view, also when you're playing growing up, the dream is to play in Madison Square Garden.
Right.
With the Knicks, right? So,
that's the Mecca, man. Come on.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, I remember going there as a kid and being this is the best. It's still the best. It's still the best arena, I think. Obviously I'm a little biased, but there's nothing like Madison Square Garden anywhere.
Yeah.
We were saying with the parks, you can't recreate that in any other arena.
Sure. I know of players that would silently agree with that statement. There's nothing beats that playing in Madison.
No, there's nothing. My father-in-law I took him to Madison Square Garden years ago. So he lives in Albania, in Tirana. He never thought in his life that he would, set foot in Madison Square Garden. It was the most amazing thing ever. I didn't even tell him where we were going. I was like, just come with me. Yeah. And we showed up there, and he was just like, wow, this is, unbelievable.
It is great. Actually, I think that's, I mean, I need to speak. I'm a Knicks sympathizer. I downgraded myself as sympathizer just for time being. But actually, when you see players making the choice now, I mean, going to New York City, I mean, it's one of the biggest markets. Everyone wants to live there, and picking the Nets. And actually, KD has done a couple of interviews in which he explains his reasoning on it. I think that's more disheartening than actually losing, because if you're contending and lose, I mean, it happens. But that there's a good team there.
It's only, New York is only cut out for certain types of people, right? So if you're not cut out for it, don't even get close to it, because if you don't have a thick skin enough to deal with the media here, deal with the fans, it's going to be a bad experience for you. There's only, a select amount of guys that can really handle that. And looking at that whole situation with KD and Kyrie, Kyrie grew up as a Nets fan. You can't knock him, right? He grew up, right? He grew up aspiring to be like Jason Kidd, and hey, on some level, probably on a lot of levels, that's why he came back to do that, right? So, he wanted to be on the team that he grew up as a fan, which, you can't really hate on that, right? As anybody knows, growing up playing ball, there were certain teams you imagined in your head, hitting that winning shot at the buzzer. So if you have a chance to be on that team as a professional, why not, right? And if you can bring one of your boys in who's one of the best players in the world, you can't really hate him.
Icing on the cake. Yeah.
Right. You can't it makes sense, right?
No, but it's
the Knicks weren't even in the conversation, it sounds like. And that's a whole nother story because of ownership, leadership, and
that's
all
the point.
Kind of stuff.
I think that's the tricky part, because that's what Katie explains, that everyone thinks of the Knicks because it's the brand, the big brand, to beat. They own the town, right?
Yep.
But us players are looking for something different, and that's kind of the issue there. Yeah.
Unless something culturally changes with the, ownership, leadership in New York, it's going to be a long ride.
I mean, I know a couple of guys that are working brand partnerships there, and they are, top class and good people. And they are doing phenomenally. I mean, because the sports product is adverse because it's not winning and so on, and still they manage to bring revenue. But yeah, in general, I think there needs
players,
to be something different.
As far as putting a winning product on the court, Madison Square Garden is a unique place because people are going to go to games no matter if they're good or bad, right?
Yep.
The brand partners will be there because they need the eyeballs, the reach, and all that. But at the end of the day, the average Knicks fan is not in a happy place.
It's not a joy house. No,
it's very challenging to be, and hey, where I sit, I'm a Knicks fan, a Mets fan, and a Jets fan. I mean, my world from a sports outlook on life, I never thought I would say that the Islanders are the best team in New York, but they are. And it's challenging. Every year it's the same thing. The Jets are by far the worst football team in probably the history of football. The Mets, that whole debacle, thankfully they've got some new ownership coming in, and that changed.
They're working in something interesting. I mean, they got bad luck there, but yeah, I think they are in the right path at least. Yeah.
But the Knicks, I mean, it doesn't even matter when they change coaches and general managers, and for whatever reason, no really good player wants to go there. They just don't. Like, so, you know, this offseason will be interesting. Like, if they can manage a few trades and, you know, but I mean, they had the most. I think they had one of the most cap spaces of any team last year, and we saw what they got. Not much.
Yeah,
they should bring Melo back.
Yeah, I actually agree.
He's
with
part
that.
of the conversation. Eh?
That's what I heard.
Chris Paul.
I'm not mad at that.
Chris Paul back too.
Yeah, I mean, those guys are obviously they're a little old, and you know, I don't know how they'll be able
They'll
to
hold up. Yeah.
You know, like if they can really hold up throughout a whole season, but it could be, you know, to benefit some of the younger guys, just to like show them the professionalism
and to change the narrative and cement, you know, that
also,
stars can come back to the team. Yeah.
And also from a media perspective, how great would it be that Melo comes back to retire? You know,
I would love it.
And with the new game of all this load management stuff, you can run those guys through the season and have a good performance.
But you need some good young guys too. I mean, RJ's I think going to be great. Yeah. You know, but we'll see. I mean, it's you know, I don't think it's time to give up on a bunch of the other guys. I still think Frank has a real bright future ahead of him.
He's really athletic and he's a really good player.
I think he's going to be really good. I think, you know, he's still young. What's he, 21 still? Like, you know.
And to your point, it's not easy when you are, you know, young, probably culturally different, and being in that team, in that city, it's tough, man.
Speaking the language as your first language, like being in, you know, they brought him over, he was like 18. I mean, you're a kid, right? Like, you know,
dealing with New York.
Right, adapting to the biggest city in the world and, like, being on center stage and all this pressure. You know, you're a lottery pick, like you're expected to be amazing right now, and the team is terrible. There's not much you can do to really, you know, you just got to try and help yourself and, like, you know, block out the noise. So, you know, hopefully they let him develop and you know, I think he's going to be a stud. You know, it may take longer than expected, but he's got, you know, the work ethic that, you know, there's one thing I remember my coach always, like, from a defense perspective, you can't really coach that. You either have that or you don't.
Yep.
And you have to have the heart to play D and really hustle. And he's got that. The offensive ability stuff, you can coach that. You can practice all day in the gym and you can get better on those things, I think. But, like, to play defense like he does really shows his talent. And, like, New York needs that. That's what New York basketball is about, hardcore defense. So, you know, I see hopefully, you know, they let him stay. And, you know, I think with him and RJ and some of the Mitch, obviously, you know, hopefully there's like a little core nucleus that they can really keep them together. But they don't get other guys around them. It's, you know, it's going to be a rocky road.
Yeah. Going to be tough.
I think, Luis, I think we are approaching the hour, but I would be remiss if we don't talk a little bit about, you know, probably the differences, but you work in brand partnerships. So in terms of what brands are really looking for and how they want to construct these, you know, platform partnerships to run their campaigns, I'll want to take your take.
I mean, I think it's authenticity, right? It's, you know, we are the most authentic media entity around the game of basketball. There's no, like, we are it. We are the realest basketball in your face, you know, media company. Some brands that's great for, some it's challenging, right? You know, but I think, you know, the quality of content that we put out speaks for itself. And I think brands see that and they see, you know, how vocal we are and how true to the game we are. And when you think of basketball, you think of slam, right? You know, it's obviously you have the NBA and you think of that too, but, you know, from a, you know, one sport media company, there's nobody like slam, right? You know, we cater to the audience of hardcore basketball, you know, lovers. If you're not serious about basketball, we're probably not for you, right? If you're trying to clown the game and, you know, be somewhat childish around things, there are other media outlets that do that for you, right? But if you are really serious about the content and the authenticity that you want to associate with, that's the, the brand partners that we work with, right? So, obviously, partners that we, the Nikes, the Adidases, the Converses, the Under Armours, the real endemic brands around the sport, Foot Locker, House of Hoops, we do a lot of business with those guys because they need to be authentic to the game. So we see a lot of success with those guys, and that's we work with non-endemic brands as well, but the ones that really know what authenticity of basketball is.
All right. B, I believe you had a question.
I did have a question, but I'm going to pivot and ask a different question. Since we talked so much about New York, I'm going to ask the question as, who do you think is the greatest athlete to come out of New York as a city? Doesn't, being born there like Michael Jordan doesn't count.
Right. That's
a city-produced athlete.
City-produced athlete. I mean, Marbury, probably one of the greatest, of all time, right? He's a special athlete, and he's still to this day doing things, from a basketball culture and just embracing the game globally. I mean, look what he's done since he left here, right? And all the amazing things he's done internationally for the game. And then, I mean, there are other guys, but I don't think anybody has. I don't think the impact that he's given to the world of basketball, I don't think anybody can,
No, definitely. In China, other than Yao, is him, basically, in terms of star level. We were discussing the other day about also his move against the grain and creating the Starbury shoe and all, and what it meant and why he did it. Definitely, and one of the most transcendent, PGs in the game, for sure.
Yeah,
that's true. Well, I think we're hitting that, and we don't want to really keep you for much longer. And we do appreciate your time today to, talk a little bit of shop with us and let us know what Slam is up about, and talk New York basketball, which was quite fun. So really, thank you on my behalf. Thank you very much. And I don't know what you guys want to say.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I appreciate the time and being on. This was awesome.
Excellent, Pete. We'll do a remake with our Godfather and Ambassador Glenn Chin to talk about your battles in business in basketball, right?
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
This episode is brought to you, as always, by The Connect. The Connect is Rayde Luis Baez. Follow the Intersection podcast in your favorite podcasting platform. Leave us a review and share it with a friend. This will really help us be found by more of you interested in the topics of sports marketing and deal making. Until the next one.